Hello, Internet. The Morgan You Know Podcast Network presents Balls and Brew.
Welcome to another edition of the flagship sports podcast here on the Morgan You Know Podcasting Network. I am your affable host. My name is Rod Morgan. I am joined by the producer of this and every other podcast on the Morgan You Know Podcasting Network. He is James Jamriska. Jimmy Jam, hello.
We finally got you. Baseball, more than once this season. We're talking about it today. I'm pumped. Let's go.
Listen, I've got a defense of myself as I am so apt to do. Don't you worry. We'll get to that. But first, let's throw it down to North Carolina and bring in our man, the old man, Chris King. Chris, hello.
What is up, fellas? I hear we have a Hall of Famer with us today.
You are correct, sir. Let's bring in someone who is going to help us talk about baseball. Yes, we're going to talk about baseball and then a little bit of golf because I absolutely do not want to talk about the NBA Finals. So we are bringing back a Morgan You Know Hall of Fame guest, a man who makes us smarter every time he comes on, a man who can spin a yarn like no other. He runs the Cubs Insider site on Twitter. It's a great place, not just Twitter, on the internet. It's a great place to get all of your Cubs information. It's the only Cubs affiliated account I still follow on social media because that's how much respect I have for our next guest. It's Evan Altman. Evan, hello.
Hey, thanks for that setup. I feel like I can only now let the listeners down from that point. So that's good. I've climbed the mountaintop now, and it's all downhill in a crashing avalanche of hellishness, kind of like the Cubs. So,
I was going to say, I don't even have any idea where the Cubs are at in the positioning of the NL Central division. They still play in the NL Central, right? It's been a while for me. I believe they still probably play there. I have heard that Marcus Stroman has had two incredible starts his last two times out. I managed to be in the car listening to a sports update as it came on and didn't have a chance to turn the channel in time, and I heard that. That's the only thing I can tell you about the Chicago Cubs this year, Mr. Altman. So why don't you catch our listeners who care a little bit more about the Cubs than I do at this moment and let them know what's going on with our intrepid boys from the north side.
Yeah, so and Stroman's really had like three good starts in a row, actually. So you apparently missed one of them on a radio update. That's cool, but he's up there. Potential Cy Young. I mean, he's one of the front runners right now in the National League. I think Zach Gallen's probably the actual front runner, but Stroh looks good if they could actually score runs for him. But as we speak, right, the Cubs are in fourth in the Central, in a bizarro NL Central in which St. Louis right now sits 2 games. The Cubs are bad. The Cubs are 7 games under 500. The Cardinals are 2 games behind the Cubs right now. So that means Cincinnati's in third, Pittsburgh's in second, and Milwaukee is up there 4 games over 500. The Brewers are 32-28. They're 5-5 in their last 10, and yet they are somehow still leading this absolute just dog pile of garbage that is the NL Central. So that's the only thing keeping the Cubs like with real hope, because they're just playing kind of meh baseball, but they're still in it because the division sucks.
All right, so catch me up on this real quick. What were expectations for this team coming into the year? Is this what you expected, or did you think they'd be better?
I think what we're seeing, so if we look at the month of April, they played above expectations, right? It was kind of probably an 80th to 85th percentile, maybe even higher in terms of their performance of what we could have expected. And I think May was like a 25th percentile of what we could have expected from them. So the reality is they're not as good as they were in April. They're not as bad as what they were in May. And there's Matthew Mervis. Sorry, I'm watching the game right now with a big double. My dude, Mash Mervis. I love it. Let's go sell some T-shirts. Anybody out there, go to Obvious Shirts, buy the Mash Mervis collection. You'll be contributing to my fund, my beer fund or bourbon fund. I'm not too proud. But no, I think we watched. What's weird about the Cubs, though, right? Let's look at their last several series. They split 4 games with the Padres in San Diego. Before that, they took 2 out of 3 from the Rays, who have the best record in baseball. 2 series before that, they took 2 out of 3 from the Mets, who spent a ton of money, are supposed to be a good team. But then between there, they got swept by the Reds. It's like when they play good teams, I feel like they play up to it. They're sharp there. It's just to actually go back and answer your question for real. We all knew going in, I said 82 wins was kind of my thought, just above 500, but we knew this was a team built on pitching, defense, run prevention, that sort of thing, that did not have enough margin for error that they could mess around and lose around the margins. They had to win at those little incremental things each day to be able to win. And what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is they're simply not doing it. They're not scoring enough runs to consistently win baseball games. And so they could be better. They could end up still competing for the division, maybe in the wild card, but they're playing the kind of baseball that we expected, just at a lower level of late.
You said around the margins that they're not producing enough, and I would have to say I agree with you, especially when it comes to their bullpen. I believe we have 8 saves on the year and 5 blown saves. Is that something that you were surprised of, or did you expect that bullpen to falter as much as they have?
I think so. Bullpens are typically such a fickle unit in general, right? Relievers, we can see. I mean, look at a guy, great example of last year where the bullpen actually was a bright spot for them. And you look at a David Robertson, who was essentially a cast-off. Nobody thought much of him. The Cubs got him on a cheap deal, and they were able to flip him for Ben Brown, right? Who's now one of their better starters in the. Ooh, that was a tight one. Sorry, I'm watching the game. Dansby almost got hit, but so they've always made these really good moves, and it seems like they've been so savvy with their bullpen additions, whether that's a young guy coming up, typically with just some, again, kind of a retread or somebody like that. So I think we tend to look at it and be optimistic about the moves that they made. However, that hasn't really worked out. And some of that's been injuries. We've seen some other issues kind of come and go, and there isn't that same consistency. The troublesome part is they don't have, I mentioned Robertson, he was that lockdown closer. You could put him in the ninth. You knew how things set up. But so far this year, that hasn't really been the case. There isn't that guy who you've got the ninth. Okay, now you've got the seventh. You've got the sixth. We're good to go. Whatever. Maybe somebody pitches the eighth in there even. Who knows? Maybe they can just skip the eighth. That might help. But they just haven't been able to set it up that way. And David Ross has had to kind of play around a little bit. So I'm not surprised by it because of the nature of bullpens, but I am just kind of surprised that a team that's done so well with that roster construction in the past is kind of faltering.
Now, listen, I know they came up with some new rules this year, but they still have to play the 8th inning, right? Like, that's the thing that still has to happen. That wasn't one of the new rules they came up with, was it?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, and I was kind of hoping they would eliminate the first inning for Kyle Hendricks in the past. He actually looked good the other night, the last time, but it used to be like, man, if you could just let Kyle Hendricks start in the second inning, he'd have been fine like the last couple years. But no, it's like the 13th floor on buildings, right? For the Cubs, if they could just like eliminate one of those late innings, I think they'd probably be okay.
So, Evan, you mentioned Swanson here. Let's talk about some of the big free agents that the Cubs picked up and kind of where they are right now. I think we can cross Hosmer off as somebody that was not a good fit for the Cubs. But talk to me about Dansby Swanson real quick. Has he met your expectations? What does he need to work on? Is this a good long-term investment for the Cubs?
Yeah, I mean, it really kind of surprisingly, like the way everything played out across the whole offseason, right? I was like, okay, this is like the fourth.
I was going to say he was not number one in the Cubs fans' hearts. Yeah.
But it was kind of like one of those where, I mean, I'm 44, so literally half a lifetime ago, it might have been like, hey, you've gone out to the bar, you're single, and you've got enough drinks in you, and all the rest of the pairings have kind of, there's not many options left, and you just want to go home with somebody, and that's kind of how it felt. But as the offseason continued to go on, whether we convinced ourselves of it or what, it's finally just became like, please just sign someone. Like, we need a slump buster. And, but, once you started to kind of dig into it, and I read up on a bunch of things and saw some interviews with him, kind of where he really took charge of his mental health journey a few years ago and really had been dealing with a lot of anxiety and things like that kind of since being the number one draft pick. And so it was really cool to hear him open up about that. And when you look at when he finally really started to get to working on that with a professional, that was kind of a few years ago in Atlanta. And if you look at his production since then, he's gotten a little bit better every year. He's improved in those areas. We're talking about a Gold Glove defender. We've seen that so far from him. And that's something that doesn't go away, right? Like, that's day in, day out. Even if he's not producing at the plate, you've got a Gold Glover. Plus, Nico Horner, who should have been in the Gold Glove conversation last year, more so, is now over at second base. So you tighten those things up, and it really felt like one of those deals where Swanson got the list of players. He's calling down through them. He's coming in, knows how to win, knows how to lead. And I think that goes back to just how he grew up and again, playing at Vanderbilt, winning a national title there, being a number 1 draft pick. Like, this guy's been through a lot of these things. And I think it's not just rationalization now. This ended up, and they got him for less money than what a lot of these teams. I mean, look at the mess that happened with Carlos Correa, right? Like 3 different teams the guy signed with this offseason. And to just be able to say, hey, this is our shortstop. This guy's going to fit really well with our team moving forward. I think this probably ended up being not just the only choice that they were kind of left with, but honestly, probably the best choice.
So let's go to one more then. Bellinger, who was off to a decent start, 271 average, had 7 home runs. As someone who has him on his fantasy baseball team that's been on the bench for the past month, is he ever coming back? And what were your thoughts before leaving? Because it seemed like he was kind of getting out of that funk that he was in last year.
Yeah, I mean, and so that was one of those where originally I was not as sold on him being. I didn't know he would be quite as good as he was, but that's another one where, I really felt like if you look back at his struggles in Los Angeles, and it started with a shoulder injury that never completely healed, and the fact that the guy popped out his shoulder, which actually everybody talks about it when he did the celebration with Kike Hernandez in the NLCS in 2017. I'm sorry, 2020. 2017 was when they played the Cubs in the NLCS, but in 2020, he popped out his shoulder, popped it back in, and then played in the World Series. But that wasn't like the first time it had happened, right? Normally people don't pop out their shoulder celebrating unless they've done it several times before. So he's dislocated that shoulder. Then he had surgery, came back, and I think, and I've written about it, so I won't get into too much detail here, but I think what we saw from him was this long-running residual effect of not only the injuries, but then the surgery, and then not really being strong enough either physically or perhaps mentally to overcome that. So if you look at side-by-sides of his swing from this year and then the 3 previous, you can see some very serious differences in him, those posts. So you look at like 20, 21, 22, 23, and he really was favoring that shoulder, and he was kind of doing a lot of things, looping the hands and all that. So long story short, as I said with Swanson, you're talking about a guy who comes in with Gold Glove caliber defense in center field, but I think who's healthy, who's out to prove a point, who knows that he can make a ton more money if he's playing and in a new situation. I'm not big on the whole change of scenery alone changing things, but sometimes you get in a funk, you're in a bad place, and you really just mentally, you need a reset. Get out of LA, go to a different spot, be in a different organization. I think that's helped tremendously. And whether he'll come back or not, God, this is the one thing I hate about the Cubs so much. I'm sure other teams do it.
Yep.
The Mets are awful about it, but it's like you could see how jacked up that knee looked when he came down. They're like, oh, no, he's cool. He could probably play tomorrow if he felt like pinch hitting, but maybe the next day. And then it's like, oh, no, he's going to go on the IL for a month now. Right? Like, you're not fooling anyone. And, it's gamesmanship. You don't want to let the other team know. I'm like, okay, that one game, right? Oh, guys, hey, look out. He might be able to pinch hit. Like, what advantage do you gain from that of just putting him on the IL and letting him rest and just letting people know that? Don't need to play a man down for 2 or 3 days.
Well, they might be in 5th place in the NL Central if they weren't doing that, Evan. Come on, give them credit.
Right. I know you gotta again. It's the margins. It's the margins they gotta win.
Let me ask you this, Evan. We're getting to the point now in the season where teams are starting to decide if they want to buy or sell. I am worried that our Cubs will decide to sell when I think we have a pretty decent core of guys that are younger than 30 with a lot of guys that are still looking to make their way up to the league, especially next year. Do you see the Cubs selling, or are they going to hold and hope to keep this core that they have together? Because we have, I think, Swanson, Horner, Inhop. I like Suzuki. Those guys are all under 30. I'd like to see them continue to be Cubs, do you think we're going to see a sale of anybody or any of the good 3 starting pitchers we have right now as well?
Wait a minute. What possible evidence do we have that Tom Ricketts would be willing to let a young core just walk out of town? What possible evidence do we have of that?
It's never happened before, at least not in the last year.
Yeah,
we got to go back. Yeah, we have to go back 2 years for that. So recent history suggests that they'll all be kept around. No, if we look at the 2021 season, right, which Rod is referencing there, when we did see the mass exodus of a lot, and what's so wild about that, right? If you go, I believe it's June 24th. When the Cubs got a combined no-hitter over the Dodgers. They were in first place. They were, I think they made it to first at that point. But anyway, they were looking really good, right? They were in contention. They were definitely there. And then they lost like 13 straight games after that moment. Like they went from being, they are buyers. They are going, and almost in July at this point, right? The trade deadline's the end of July. They're looking great. And then 2 weeks later, it was like, nope, they're done. They're selling. And so I think, I don't want to set that same line of demarcation, but I do think this month of June, right, as we're speaking now, they're in the middle of a 10-game West Coast road swing. They've got to come home. They got the Pirates a couple times this month. They go out to London to play the Cardinals for a couple games. They've got to play the Orioles. It's a pretty tough month of June. If they can come out of that and still at least be treading water in the division, I think, now we can see them push into July and see what happens. But if not, and they fall far enough back that they just don't believe it's going to happen, you're looking at, again, Cody Bellinger, only signed through this year. There's a mutual option for next year that there's no way in heck he's picking up. He's going to go make some more money. Marcus Stroman has a player option for next year at $21 million, but he's making $25 this year, made $25 last year. We talked about him being a Cy Young contender. He's not taking $21 million to come back for 1 year. He's going to hit the market if they don't extend him, which they won't if they can flip him for more. Drew Smyly is another guy, right? Only on the 1 year left. Kyle Hendricks, maybe if a team wants to kind of do that, to think, hey, a veteran pitcher maybe on the cheap. Patrick Wisdom is a guy who we could see moved, right? Because everybody loves power. And again, you could probably pick him up if a team lacks that. So I think we've got a month before we know. It's mid-July. We're going to know for sure, maybe by the start of July, what they're going to do. But I'd love to see him buy. I'd love to see him go for it and really try to push this thing out and try to at least show the fans that have been sticking around that they care, because this rebuild thing has taken too long already. There's no reason on earth why the Chicago Cubs should be spending 3 years at this mess.
All right, listen, we promised Mr. Altman that we wouldn't keep him forever because he was nice enough to join him pretty late. I just have one last question I want to ask, and it's about the only person that I am familiar with, the only vestige of the old Cub teams that I used to love, and he is the manager. Where do we stand with David Ross? Is he going to continue being the manager because we like what we do, or is he literally just finishing out his contract and then the Cubs are going to move on to somebody else here soon?
I mean, I guess it depends on, there's a ton of people that are like, fire Ross. And, the question to that is like, who are you going to get? Like, who would have made this team better right now? There's no manager you're going to bring in here with the roster they've got who would have concocted some magic and suddenly gotten, he's not going to keep dudes from getting injured. He's not going to. Now, there are a couple times, and I've written about this and I've complained about it on Twitter and whatever, where there's some weird lineups that he's rolled out there that I don't think were set up very well based on what the pitching matchup was. But, he's under contract. I think when you're Jed Hoyer looking at this, unless you're really unless it's a question of Tom Ricketts is actually going to come out and try to, let's look at the Indianapolis Colts for a while there, where it just felt like, Chris Ballard's going to fire Frank Reich so he could kind of save his own hide or something like that, right? To use an Indiana example, which we see a lot of times, right? The general manager, the president will fire a coach, or a coach will fire an assistant coach to just scapegoat them and gain a few more months or another year on their contract. But I think Ross is good. I don't think that's the issue at all. But I don't know that he's the guy right now who's going to take him over the top. But again, if they go out and they actually, and I know, Rod, you don't believe this will happen, but if they do go and spend some money this offseason, they do actually get the right players, Ross is going to look a hell of a lot smarter. If the Cubs were scoring 3 runs a game behind Marcus Stroman, David Ross looks a heck of a lot smarter, right? Just because the players are actually hitting the ball and fielding it properly. It's crazy.
All right, so I guess what I'm hearing here is that Jed Hoyer needs to bring in Gardner Minshew, and then everything will be just fine for the Cubs, right? And then that's what I'm hearing. So Jimmy, Chris, if you guys got one more for the Hall of Famer, you guys hit him at him, and then we'll let him get out of here.
I will say, Evan, I don't think I'd care if the Cubs sold Patrick Wisdom. He hasn't been hitting very well at all this year. I wouldn't mind him leaving the Cubs. If we had to sell anybody that you had mentioned, that would be who I would be least concerned about if they sold.
Yeah, and that would probably make the most sense, honestly, just because, although the only issue is like they need power so badly, but I figured this would have been something that was done last year because, again, I looked at a team like San Diego that lacked the home run ball and that could have picked up a guy for that stretch run that would have done something like that. You know, I think those things are out there. But they do have a bunch of young guys coming up, particularly on the pitching side of things. And they've got a lot of young hitters who are kind of coming up.
All right, Evan. Well, we really appreciate you coming on, talking Cubs with us. Rod does not let us talk at all about baseball anymore because he's mean that way. But there's always room for Evan Altman on the Balls and Brew podcast.
Yeah, wait a minute, Jimmy, don't speak for me, all right? Evan Altman is a valued member of this podcast network. He has talked Fast and the Furious with us before, all right? He's been on for Major League, right? We'll go to Mr. Altman for his wit and wisdom about many things, not just the Cubs. Don't you be painting me into a corner, Jim Riska. All right, so Mr. Altman made us smarter on the Cubs. I even threw in a couple of little nuggets there, so all you Cub fans out there feel a little bit better. But it surprisingly sounds enough like the Cubs are up to their same old tricks that made me kind of want to go away from the Cubs. Jimmy, am I wrong in assuming that it kind of seems like business as usual on the north side? That's what it sounded like to me.
Well, I think, Rod, it's the fact that they have their young players under contract for a while still. So it's kind of like pre-20, it's like 2014-ish.
Okay.
So we'll get to 2020 and 2021. Don't worry. We'll get there.
Good. That's
just
definitely
not for
what
a few
I heard.
years.
Someplace that we got to today that I am absolutely surprised about, and I'll just come right out front here now and say I am kind of horrified about, is we've been talking on this podcast about LIV Golf, which was a venture created by the Saudi business fund to come up with a competing PGA tour, so to speak, someone that will compete against the PGA tour. There's been many barbs thrown out in the media. There's been many terrible articles written about all of the things that Saudi Arabia has done and that all these players are fine taking all of their money. Many players have made gobs and gobs and gobs of money, and they were called charlatans. And now, Jimmy, it's all over. We're just going to act like it didn't happen and everybody's back under the same umbrella. That's kind of how you thought this was going to end, right?
What we're talking about today is coming together to unify the game of golf and to do so under one umbrella, said PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan to CNBC. This is ridiculous. And it goes back to one of my old sayings. This is the philosophy I live by, have always lived by. Don't get cocky. Because the second you get cocky, it's going to come back to bite you. And we can find this bad because we're not the ones that are getting paid and all that stuff, right? But the things that the PGA Tour said about the people, they blackballed everybody. No one cheered for Mickelson at the Masters. Are you kidding me? Because of what he did. And guess what? They're all together now. Why? Because of one thing and one thing only. Money.
Disgusting. Chris, your thoughts?
I mean, isn't the big winner Jay Monahan? His checkbook get fatter?
There's no doubt.
By a lot.
There's no doubt.
I mean, I was kind of shocked by this too. I wasn't necessarily as in tune with the whole antitrust lawsuit that was going on and how they were in appeal, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for like the next 6 months about discovery and how the tour didn't want to turn over certain stuff and then LIV Golf didn't want to turn over certain stuff. I mean, I think this is just them protecting what money they can make in the future versus fighting. I do think that the worst part about it is some of these guys that came out last year and supported the tour, like Morikawa, like Roy McIlroy, like they turned down big money and defended the tour. And then they had a big conference in Delaware last year where they tried to almost reshape this year's tour to help the players move forward. And now it seems all for naught. It seems like kind of a slap in the face to them.
Jimmy, we just did a Succession finale on this very podcast network. It's the episode right before this one, and I couldn't help but think of Rory McIlroy somewhere sitting on a park bench, just staring out into the distance with much the same look on his face that Kendall Roy had at the end of a Succession finale. Because turns out Rory didn't have the votes to borrow a phrase from Succession.
Wow. Yeah, and a lot of we don't have the votes for a lot of things. Yeah, it's the memes really help you get through things like this where you just can't believe this happened. Like, seriously, they merged, Rod. It was kind of a takeover by LIV Golf, by the way, but they merged.
Yeah.
Can you imagine me telling you 24 hours ago that this was going to happen? You're like, what are you talking about? There's no way. I mean, you look at the agents that are coming out and saying, I didn't know about any of this. The players didn't have any idea about any of this. Greg Norman's like, a great day in global golf for players and fans alike. And I believe his new logo instead of the shark is two middle fingers just up.
It's amazing how stuff doesn't leak when you're dealing with the Saudi crown princes, huh, Jim? And a regime kind of like that, making sure everybody keeps their mouth shut. Surprising that happened.
Yeah, may want to keep that under wraps. That under wraps.
I mean, I really thought that this came on quick because of that appeals court decision to not dismiss that like the day or two before. I think it was like maybe it was on Monday. But I really thought that accelerated everything. And then they decided, listen, we can still make the rules. You give us all your money and we'll let your players in kind of thing. So, yeah, like LIV bought their way in and kind of overtook it. But, like, it's still the PGA that's going to be running, the rankings and that type of stuff. I do think in the long run it may help the players earn more, especially those on the lower end of the tour rankings. Past that, I'm still just in shock a little bit.
You're right about everything you just said there, Chris, and I guarantee it's going to stay like that for a little while. But let's remember, he who has the money makes the rules, okay? And at this point moving forward, the PGA Tour is going to be dictated by what the Saudi Crown Princes want. No matter what it says in the press release right now, what the Saudi Crown Princes want a couple of years from now is what's going to happen because it's their investment now. And isn't that just where you want the PGA Tour to be when you're watching the Hartford Open of Greater Connecticut on a Sunday afternoon? Isn't that what you want to think about? The Saudi Crown Prince and all the mishmash that goes along with those guys. But hey, that's where we are on golf right now. But as my guy Kevin Clark from The Ringer said, for the immediate future, golf on Thursday between Sunday will be exactly the same to you on your television screen. And that's all we can worry about right now. And we'll have to see where all of the rest of the chips fall. Let's do a abbreviated fast break, an actual fast break here where we touch on a couple of NBA topics to close out. Jimmy will host from here. So here's the quick little fast break intro that you love. And then Jimmy will have a couple of cues for Chris and I.
Welcome to the Fast Break, the fastest 15 minutes in the NBA. You are with Jimmy, Rod, and Chris, and we've got a lot of things to talk about. We're going to hit the finals real quick. Not exactly the star-studded finals as far as history and teams that we wanted or could have had, but we've had two good games and an upset with the Heat beating the Nuggets in Game 2. So we have Heat Nuggets tied at 1. Chris King, let's go to you. What is one thing that you've taken out of this series so far?
There is a chance a couple of IU grads can actually get an NBA championship ring.
I love you so much, dude. You are so on point. I'm going to go to Rod here in a second. If he does not mention Seth Rollins at all, I'm going to be disappointed. Yeah, you are correct. Two IU grads could get their championship. Obviously, Victor Oladipo's watching because he just messed up his knee again. And Cody Zeller, who had some points. He's playing, baby. We love it. We love it.
He's getting minutes. And let me tell you something. You guys know how old I am. My mother is now watching the NBA Finals so she can watch Cody Zeller play.
All right, Rod. I need one takeaway you've had from this series so far. Please, curb stomp somewhere. Just put it in there.
Let me do it this for you. Wait, the thing with the Heat continues to be the thing that we've talked about with the Heat. You never know who's going to come off of that bench and deliver the curb stomp to you, right? That's the thing with the Heat, right? It just transfers from one guy to another, much the same way that Seth Rollins was just transferred the new world heavyweight belt from Triple H to him after beating AJ Styles. Yeah, whether it's a Duncan Robinson, whether it's a Gabe Vincent, it doesn't matter for the Heat, right? Kyle Lowry can be having a terrible game and somebody on the Heat will pick him up. Caleb Martin can fall back to earth, which, by the way, shout out to our guy Williams. There was an over-under Caleb Martin points for the finals at 15, shout out to all of you guys who bang the under, because there ain't no way that dude is getting over 15 points a game in the NBA Finals now. So his moment in the sun was over. So, hey, I'd shout out to the Heat, man. I mean, as much as I despise them for taking out my Celtics, nobody beat Denver at home this year. Miami just came back and did it again. So I guess I have to say about the NBA Finals, I'm going to stop counting out the Heat and just figure that they're going to win at this point. That's probably where I'm at, Jim.
I think what I taken out of this is the Heat can win it, and we have to stop overreacting to every single game. I mean, it's what you have to do because we talk about it and stuff, but really it is the whole of the playoffs. And I bet you Caleb Martin kind of wishes they got beaten that game 7, because his future would have looked a lot more lucrative if that happened. We're going to go to an abbreviate. Oh, wait a minute. That's the music. Rod Nation of the week.
Come on, that's exactly what the guy's doing, man. Kyrie has cared about one thing and one thing only for quite a while: money. He frivolously threw away a bunch with the vaccine because he thought it would make him a hero to certain types of people on the internet, but then he realized that he didn't want to lose all that money. He immediately went to the Nets and said, give me a max contract. The Nets said, show me you deserve a max contract. Kyrie went out and showed him he deserved a max contract. They still stuck a middle finger in his face, and he said, trade me. The only reason he's doing any of this to Dallas is to try to make somebody thinks that he actually has any semblance of responsibility inside of his body towards any kind of a team, when he absolutely does not. He wants the money, and then he wants to get the hell out of town, and the only team that can give him the most money is Dallas. Cuban, you're smarter than this. You're on Shark Tank for a reason. Don't do it. Yeah, you know what? And this Rod Nation is for somebody I don't often chuck under the bus, all right? And it's about a situation that I am just as concerned with as this particular person who is about to get Rod Nationified. I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it or not, but Adam Silver, my man, if you're not going to tell us what your decision is on the Ja Morant stuff, and you're not going to release the information that you supposedly have gathered, then let's just keep it under your hat that you don't wear on your bald head there, my friend. Absolutely nothing is gained by floating that out during the NBA Finals. You seem kind of ineffective and frankly just foolish for saying, well, I don't want to take away from the NBA Finals. But the fact that you just uttered it in the first place sort of takes away from the NBA Finals, because you're a smart enough person to understand how Twitter and all of the sports talking head shows work. So the minute that you release that, they're going to chew it up and spit it out and all of the above. And there's already a whole lot of fiery conversation out there about this and how many games he's going to be suspended for, and people up in arms about a suspension the NBA hasn't even handled down yet. So Adam Silver, my man, Rod Nation for you for this circus already, and you better hope you have your ducks in a row, because this is still a thorny situation.
So instead of saying what the punishment is and the reasons behind the punishment, giving it a one-day news cycle, and then it just goes away. Oh, yeah, remember that happened. We're going to wait for another 10 days, 15 days to say something, because they don't want to. They're not going to want to overshadow the draft either. They don't want that. Or maybe they'll just do it right before Wembanyama gets picked, so it just gets out of there. Yeah, Chris, this was really odd to me, because we don't know what they have. They have more, obviously, than we know. So what's the point of saying, we'll let you know later? Just let us know now, right?
Yeah, listen, Adam Silver needs to take a couple cues from our wrestling professionals that we talk about in the Yeah We Know podcast. Learn how to work the mic and make a promo. You either are going to lay it all out right there and say, this is what it is, and this is the reason why, because this is what we know, or you just go vague and be like, listen, we're still investigating, we're still finding out and searching for new information, and this may take a few more weeks. Like, you don't come out like, yeah, we know what's going to happen, but you guys don't get to know for another 10 days. So, I mean, that's the absolutely worst way to bring out any news about it.
So you want Adam Silver to be less Trish Stratus and more LA Knight. Yeah! I just wanted to get that in there for sure. Let's get to the...
I love the idea, too, of wrestlers, like, waiting weeks to have something figured out. Like, I don't know who came out of the back room and attacked me from behind, but about 10 to 12 days from now, I'm going to figure it out. I love the idea of a wrestler doing that.
If you smell, all righty. So we're going to go to the King's Hardwood Hierarchy. All right, so we did this a couple weeks ago, and we went through all of the coaching jobs, and we kind of put them in the hardwood hierarchy here. So we're going to go back to that, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the final decisions were and what we think about that. Going through this real quick. It's the fast break. We know it. We still have one job open, and let's start there. The Raptors. They fired Nick Nurse. They haven't brought anybody in, Rod, because they don't know what direction they're going to go in. Are they going to trade people? Are they going to add people? Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby. Where do you think they're going to go?
It's a very good question, right? Masai Ujiri has earned plenty of benefit of the doubt in his position up there as head of basketball ops for the Toronto Raptors. I wonder how much comfort the Raptors upper management has in continuing without a coach, because to me, I think the Raptors like that their cards are all hidden right now, right? They're poker players and nobody can see which way they're going to lean. But if they hire a coach who's more of a developmental kind of guy, then that's going to maybe tip their hand that, oh, the Raptors are going to be selling off and they're not going to be able to be sneaking around undercover at night and just get a huge haul for OG Anunoby, much the same way the Minnesota Timberwolves gave up a exorbitant haul for Rudy Gobert, because that was one of those trades that was worked out and none of us heard about it. I think what happens nowadays is when trades get out into the cycle and everybody starts chopping them up on the sports shows, the GM then becomes real worried about looking bad. But if he's got a trade that nobody's heard about, he'll pull the trigger and then have to deal with the consequences after. So I think the Raptors are going to try to actually hold out as long as they possibly can here, Jimmy, to not give away what's going to happen with VanVleet and maybe try to keep some cards to get something out of Anunoby on draft night.
I think that's a really good idea. Chris King, thoughts on the Raptors?
It's tough. I mean, you are in that situation, like Rod said. Do you get a coach now and that helps dictate what you do, or do you make the decision of what you're going to do and find a coach that's going to work in that same direction? So they really don't have much more time to make a decision. And maybe they do already know. Maybe they're waiting till the finals are over. Maybe they've already reached out to the Heat and Nuggets to talk about a couple of their assistants or something to that effect, and they have to wait until the finals are over to actually interview them. So we may not know what they're thinking, but I do think they have to make a decision quicker rather than later. That's for sure.
Frank Vogel in as the Suns coach. He is used to managing people with very high egos. He's won a championship. I don't think the egos on the Suns are quite as big as the ones on the Lakers. I don't think that's quite possible. Is this a good move, Rod, for Frank Vogel, and then also a good move for the Suns?
I think it's a fine move for the Suns, right? You're on a crunched timeline with Kevin Durant being as old as he is, and if you have one more year out of Chris Paul even being able to be anything, which I'm not entirely sure of, I think there could be a good chance that Chris Paul isn't on Phoenix's roster to start next year. But as I keep teasing, we'll have plenty of time in the offseason to talk about all of that weirdness. But with a guy like Frank Vogel, you get a man who knows the job, right? He knows how to get on the buses, right? He knows how to get in the hotel room, right? All of those things kind of matter, right? You're not going to have somebody trying to figure out all of that stuff. So Kevin Durant's going to feel comfortable there. And one thing Kevin talks about so often is he likes being coached on defense, and Frank Vogel is definitely a defensive guy. So I think it's probably a pretty good hire for the Suns. I don't think you want to go for an assistant on that team. You need to have maximum capability reached out of that team's talent in the next 2 years, and Frank Vogel is a guy who can possibly bring that out.
Chris, do you think Vogel is going to be the coach that's going to be able to manage that very short bench that they have right now?
Listen, that bench is going to be trouble no matter who's the coach for the Suns. I do think, listen, I thought this was a good coach for Aiton when the hire was made known. However, I think it was just today or yesterday, Vogel came out and said that Aiton could be one of the best centers in the league. That's a bit of a stretch, but I do like how he's putting that faith behind his center who has had issues on this team in the past, whether with coaching or in the locker room. If they can get a consistently good DeAndre Ayton out there on the court every game, that does improve this Suns team immensely.
Let me say one thing real quick before we get to the fact that I think Chris pronounced his last name 3 different ways there within the course of talking about him one time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I worry that the problem is more on DeAndre's side based on what the Hall of Famer Father Pete had to say about Monty Williams, okay? I trust in most things that Father Pete knows. Father Pete is a Notre Dame guy. Monty Williams is a Notre Dame guy. I tend to think Monty Williams comports himself with the utmost class. I would be worried that DeAndre Ayton might not be able to mesh with any coach because it's his deal and not the coach's personality.
For a lot more on the Monty Williams and Pistons, make sure you listen to our Father Pete episode. Always a good listen on the More You Know podcasting network. Nick Nurse is
he was all in on Monty Williams, and then we found out like 30 minutes later that they actually hired him for that massive contract.
Oh. Jimmy loves it when that happens.
It's fantastic. It's great because sometimes I have to get him before. Yeah, this happened. We can record when we can record. Calm down, people. Nick Nurse is a 76er. Rod, is Nick Nurse a 76er because he sat down with ownership and they said James Harden is definitely coming back? Or is he a 76er because he sat down with ownership and they said, we are not bringing James Harden back? Because that doesn't mesh with me. Harden and Nurse do not mesh.
No, but here's the thing. I don't know that Harden meshes with many coaches not named Mike D'Antoni, right? And there's not many coaches out there that have the same personality as Mike D'Antoni that are just kind of, hey, I'm going to roll the ball out there to you, James, and you do whatever you feel is best, guy. So I think what happened here is we got to remember Nick Nurse, one of his first hires in the NBA, was in the Rockets organization when Daryl Morey was running the Rockets organization. So I think this is just typical Daryl Morey, right? He brought PJ Tucker in last year. He brought Danielle House in last year. He waited for James Harden. Now he's bringing in one of his other guys, right? Daryl Morey has his guys. He has a good resume. He builds pretty good teams. That Philadelphia 76ers team was pretty good last year. Couldn't get any further than they always do. Maybe that's Doc's fault. I tend to not believe Doc is as bad as people make him out to be, but his record does speak for itself. So I think Daryl just hired the coach he felt was best and is hoping that his personal relationship with James Harden keeps him on the team. That's what I think's happening, Jim.
All right, Chris King, let's talk about the Bucks real quick before we move on to our final story. Adrian Griffin coming in with the Bucks. Is that the move you thought was going to happen?
No, but I kind of get where they're going. They needed something to push them over to the next level, get them back up to the top again. You have seen them, even though they ended up with a great record, number one seed in the East this year, since they've won the NBA championship, they have fallen back in the wrong direction in the playoffs, and that's where it counts. You got to get something more that you're not getting currently, and so a change like this could end up being the exact type of thing that Giannis and the Bucks need.
Let's remember Jim Nurse was a first-time coach when the Raptors won that. You know what I mean? So it's very possible that you can have a first-time guy give you that spark. So it could be good for Milwaukee. I don't know, man. As long as you have Giannis, though, I think things are going to be all right in Milwaukee.
They could be okay. In a place where things haven't been all right, but are going to get interesting, in Dallas with the Mavericks. Sources say that Kyrie Irving is trying to recruit LeBron James to come and play with the Mavericks. Couple issues there. Number one, LeBron James is under contract with LA. Number two, Kyrie Irving is not under contract with Dallas right now. Rod, what if I propose this trade? What if I'm the Mavericks and I say, hey, Lakers, I got Tim Hardaway Jr. for 3 years at $19 million. I got Davis Bertans. Or Bertans.
First off, I'd say, do we have anything else? Because so far, not off to a good start.
$16 million for 3 years. I got Reggie Bullock, $10 million for 2 years. And I've got the one pick I think we still might have, but it's like 6 years from now.
Which is the 10th pick. No, I think they have to trade the 10th pick in this year's draft.
Yes, they could do the 10th pick. Yeah, they could do the 10th pick. For LeBron James. If I call you and say, hey, how about that? How excited are you?
I'm going to borrow a joke from my guy J.E. Skeets, who leads the No Dunks NBA podcast that I like an awful lot, but I think the Lakers would fire back that they need to throw in J.R. Ewing's hat, a tub of barbecue sauce, and the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, and then maybe I'd think about
Chris King, do you think giving up the cheerleaders would be a no for on Dallas' side?
I mean, I think the Lakers would say no to anything that involved JaVale McGee, right?
Yes, that of
I didn't think JaVale was going to get a shout out.
Of everything, yes, it was the JaVale McGee. Yeah, what a weird time we live in, because you know that Kyrie's camp sent that out. I can bring LeBron to Dallas. Listen, this is not happening. it's a nice thought, but if the Lakers are ever going to trade LeBron James, it's going to be a lot more than a future pick and a lot of contracts that they don't really want anyway.
Don't fall for it, Dallas. Don't fall for it, Dallas. He's floating this out there so that you think he wants to be part of your team. He wants you to sign him to the 5-year max, and then he's going to whine and cry and want out before the All-Star break. Don't do it, Dallas.
Goodbye, Internet.